relationship to community and land and to the land that you are connected to. And if you'd like to learn some more about the different treaties in Alberta, we invite you to visit the following link for more information. And I think Lauren's going to drop that link in the chat. And there's also the Indigenous Canada MOOC. Sorry, my speaker notes keep getting put off every time someone comments in the chat. So there's an Indigenous Canada MOOC open course on Indigenous histories where you can learn about contemporary issues in Canada, and I believe Lauren also popped that into the chat. So before we get going, I'm just gonna go over some housekeeping issues. Bathroom breaks are very much encouraged. Feel free to eat or drink. We would also like for people to rename themselves by adding their name and pronouns. And if you could just keep yourself muted and for the duration of the presentation, that would be also really great, just to make sure that the discussion section goes nice and smoothly. And use the raise hand function and the chat box liberally. Lauren will be using that to monitor for questions. And if you would like to see a live transcription of this event, you can enable closed captionings by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen, or adjust your caption settings to show as either a live transcript in the chat bar or as a separate subtitle box near the bottom of your screen. You can find these settings by pressing the little arrow on the live transcript button. And throughout the event, relevant links will be put into the chat by Lauren. Moving on to the agenda. Questions, feel free to send them during the presentation into the chat. Questions during the Q&A session, you'll be able to ask yourself by unmuting. And the raise hand function will work really nicely as well. So just moving, and then in terms of kind of the agenda that we're going to be following today, the staff, myself, Lauren, and Michelle will be introducing ourselves. I'll be going over a little bit of an introduction to the University of Alberta's Career Center, the Department of Women and Gender Studies. We'll go through the guest speaker introductions, and I'll give them a chance to talk a little bit about themselves. We'll have the main event, kind of a guided discussion facilitated by myself. And then we'll close with a Q&A period where you can all ask some of the questions that you might have yourself to some of the panelists that we have here today. So just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a background on who I am, so my name is Eric. I'm a graduate student in the Gender and Social Justice program here at the U of A currently. I'm very interested in studying gender, social justice, issues of power, and particularly as it pertains to the healthcare system. And I'm really excited to be here with you all today, moderating this incredible panel on careers in social justice.
Yeah,
Lauren, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Lauren. I'm one of the career education coordinators at the Career Center. I'm a bit newer to the Career Center. I just started at the end of November, but so far I've been really enjoying my time here and being able to put on really great, interesting events for students at the university. So looking forward to, doing more. Thanks.
And I'll just jump in as well. I'm Michelle Marr. I'm the chair of the Department of Women's and Gender Studies. I'm an associate professor in that department. I'm also a graduate of the U of A Women's and Gender Studies program. So I'm a huge fan of this program. I think it's extremely productive and generative and, heavy hitting. We do a lot of great stuff in our program. I'm a big fan. Big promoter, and I'm delighted that we're having this event. So thank you so much to Lauren and Eric and the Career Center.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michelle. And so now I'm just going to kind of give a little bit of a rundown for those of you who aren't familiar with what the Career Center is and kind of the different services that we offer. So the Career Center offers, a wide variety of programs for not only students, but alumni and postdoctoral fellows in the form of speaker series like the one that we're holding today, as well as different presentations, workshops, individual advising and coaching sessions, and several more different types of events to help people build their career paths. With over 30 years of experience at the U of A, the Career Center has built strong ties to diverse stakeholders, both within and outside the university community. And if you have any questions about your specific career journey, or you would like more information on any of the other events, you can visit the link that Lauren just popped into the chat. And anyone at the Career Center, including myself, would be more than happy to answer some of those questions. Moving on to just a little bit of an introduction to the Department of Women and Gender Studies. I've had the opportunity of a rich undergraduate education there during my time as an undergrad, as well as my current time as a graduate student here. And I can definitely say it's been an excellent program. I've grown so much with it, I can personally say. But other than that, the Department of Women and Gender Studies offers, BAs and BA in major, minor, and honors programs, as well as an MA in Gender and Social Justice. And graduates in this program can find work in government, university administration, social services, NGOs, nonprofit, law, education, and social work. There really is no limit to the different spheres that, a social justice education in the Department of Women and Gender Studies can help you build that great foundation to kind of really branch out anywhere. So I very highly recommend. Move on. And now I'll just kind of move into an introduction of each of our panelists here today. Cole, unfortunately, was unable to make it. He had to deal with some personal circumstances, but I guess we'll start with Janice, and I'll give you all just the floor to introduce yourself. And then we'll go from Janice to Charlene to Danica to Tara. So Janice, you want to go first?
Oh, goodness. Yes, absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Janice Irwin, it's an honor to be here with all of you virtually on Treaty 6 territory. And just thanks for including me in this. I'm very excited to hear from the other speakers, not going to lie. And just, yeah, it's International Women's Day tomorrow. And so that's top of mind for me. And I'm loving seeing all these fierce women in this Zoom. So yeah, just happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation with all of you.
Excellent. Thanks, Janice. And Charlene, do you want to go next?
Perfect. Aloha, everyone. Hi, I am Charlene Smith, aka Queen C. I am honored to be here. So honored. I never actually got to go to the U of A, but I did go to the University of Toronto, Women's Studies degree back in the day. Now I'm like, oh yeah, that was a few years ago. And honestly, it was a program that completely shifted my life and changed everything about myself, found my voice. I mean, the stories I have around my journey of women's studies and just learning about ourselves, about each other, about all the isms. And so, yeah, it has greatly impacted the work that I have taken on, and now my entrepreneurial work as well, as a yoga teacher, as a wellness coach, as a mental health facilitator on so many subjects and topics. And yeah, so I'm very excited. I'm very honored to be here. And I'm so happy that Lauren invited me. Thank you, Lauren. And so happy to be like back in my university environment like 12 years later. So this feels really, really cool. So thanks, guys.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And Danica, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you. It's Danica or Danny.
Danica, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Happens a lot. Also, my baby and my spouse are also on here as Lindsay JS. My baby Georgia is 8 months. So, little plug for her. She's the best. And I am also so happy to be here, especially with this group of panelists, some of whom I've known for a while. So I am just so excited. I'm a graduate of the University of Lethbridge. I got my BA in Women and Gender Studies there. And then I was part of the first inaugural cohort of the Gender and Social Justice Studies MA program, the first thesis graduate. So I am such a proponent of the program, and always happy to be part of a discussion about how gender studies can change your life and especially your professional trajectory.
Lovely. And Tara, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Teres Lakonich, and likewise to everyone else, absolutely honored to be part of this panel with the fellow panelists and to share our experiences with you all. I am a graduate of the undergraduate program of Women and Gender Studies from the U of A, as well as I was part of the second cohort of the Masters of Arts in Gender and Social Justice offered through the U of A. And like, what can I say? I remember in my undergraduate, I had set out as a major in sociology, minor in women and gender studies. And as soon as I took my Women and Gender Studies 101, I immediately, or 201, I immediately switched my major and my minor because I knew it was where I needed for it to be my major. My initial kind of interest was in gender equality in sports, but it has transitioned and evolved over the many, many years. And I have been lucky enough to bring my knowledge from my educational background to a nonprofit sector, as well as now I've been with the Alberta Public Service for almost 8 years. So yeah, I'm excited to share a little bit more and also hear the lovely experience from the other panelists.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tara. So now just kind of moving into the main event now. So just some reminders for everybody. We will be having a Q&A at the end where attendees today will be able to ask questions directly to the panelists themselves. And continue to put your questions into the chat during the event, and we will try and get to them as they come up. And just a quick reminder, Janice does have to leave early at around 6 o'clock. So if you have any questions for Janice, please try and get those into the chat as soon as possible so that we can try to get to them as soon as possible. But yes, nonetheless, we thank Janice for being here. She's really busy. And yeah, we'll get into the event right now. So I guess just to get us going, if I had to ask each of the panelists to tell us about their educational background in about a minute or less, what would you all have to say? I know you have very rich backgrounds, but just to kind of get the ball rolling. So how about we'll start with Tara this time.
Sure, I kind of went into that a little bit in my introduction, but yeah, for me, it really it gave me a way to make sense of my past experiences as I was a sole kind of female athlete in often male-dominated sports and on male-dominated teams, and so it really gave me a way to make sense of that experience and also to look at ways that we could inform change. And I think that then, as I mentioned, like my interests in social justice and equality have shifted and evolved to kind of different areas. I'm primarily now interested in decolonizing work and social justice kind of writ large, anti-racism, etc., like probably many of these folks here. And yeah, it really just informs kind of that whole different worldview and way to inform how we can create change. And I think that is really powerful. And like, I could truly, like, knowledge is power. And I think my educational experience in women and gender studies and gender and social justice, like I truly feel empowered and emboldened by my educational experience to be able to support change and lead change and be a co-conspirator in drastic social change.
Thanks for that, Tara. And I think something you're touching on is that social justice, especially a social justice education, really seeps into all aspects of our lives, especially when it resonates with you so deeply. Thank you for that. Charlene, would you like to speak to the kind of the prompt a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So resonate so much with what Tara was saying. So thank you so much for all of what you just said. Myself, let's see. Okay, so I wanted to get to U of T, got in there and I was like, okay, what am I doing here? Am I really that smart? Like, imposter syndrome completely took over. And I had originally gone there to do political science and English, thinking I was going to follow the path that my parents asked me to follow to be a lawyer, and which it's still possible. But when I took my first like women's studies course and had this whole upheaval of my grandfather dying in between sessions and between exams, and so I had to defer exams, and it was just like a whole thing that happened in my life. And then I took the women's studies final exam, and I just felt so whole, so present, so there with all of the information, because all of these things I just never had the opportunity or the space to explore, to have put language to my experience, to understand that, wait, I'm not the only one going through this. Oh my God, stop it. Really? There's other people and there's other intersections of things that I had not realized are actually incorporated that helps to inform my experience and therefore helps me to actually heal from the traumas that I've experienced. It was just this huge light bulb that happened in my first year. So then I switched everything and I went straight into women's studies as my major, and of course, English literature as well. And it just changed everything. Again, like, didn't realize how much of the decolonization process I had to go through for myself. And then having the space and the people to talk about it with, who were just so open and just so available in the conversation, and just had some sort of awareness that nobody else I talked to up until that point had for me. So that was my reasons for getting into women's studies, because it honestly, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like learning about myself. I had no idea that all of these things that I went through impacted how I look and see the world. And if I actually acknowledge the fact that all of those things impacted the way in which I see the world, I can bring more compassion, not only to myself, but to others, seeing how it is that they see the world. So now the conversation no longer has to be this huge battle and bucking up of heads. I can actually come into a place of more of like, okay, holding space. So like my journey has been so like different. So, you know, I've been a director of student support services at a private college. I've been an educational facilitator for people with developmental disabilities. I've gone through a lot of different kind of isms, concepts, but then I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a yoga teacher. So I'm going to be a yoga teacher. So I can actually like talk all of this philosophy through and like conceptualize it in a way that is healing on the mental, physical, and spiritual levels. So that has been my journey thus far. And you know, poetry and language is also a thing that I am heading into right now. So women's studies was just that place in which I finally realized I had a voice. And it was one of my professors who actually like brought it out of me. She almost failed me. She almost failed me. That's how she got it out of me. And maybe have to go to her in office hours and talk. And then she's just like, Shar, like, I hear that you have a voice, but like, you got to tell me your thing. I'm tired of hearing what everybody else has said. You got to hear. I'm like, wait, I got a voice? What you mean? Wait, she's like, you're the scholar. I'm like, I'm a scholar? Never thought of myself in these terms. So it was just so empowering. I was like, yes, I can do things and you can do things too. It was honestly, my university experience is a huge highlight of my life, of taking my women's studies course, of just how much it empowered my soul and it empowered me to walk on this planet with a confidence that is like no other I had growing up, for sure. I grew up around brothers. So it was like, you know, any sensitive things, any feminine things were like pushed aside. So yeah, that's as summed up as I can bring it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charlene. I love what you're talking about, how gender studies or social justice education gives us a framework with which to reinterpret the world. So thank you so much for sharing that experience. Danica, would you like to kind of respond to how your education has kind of molded you and shaped you?
Oh my goodness, I feel like that's a different question.
Oh,
And
sorry.
it's a big question, but I echo so much of what the previous panelists have said. I think that's what's so unique about a social justice or gender studies education, is that personal grounding that is so profound. And often our first contact with gender studies or social justice studies is like a life-changing event for so many people. But I guess, yeah, so if I was to talk about how my educational experience has informed my work, I would think to my first gender studies professor, who was Tiffany Muller-Myrdal, and taught me, I was really worried about switching my major from pre-social work to women's and gender studies. And she showed me that I could do a lot among and in between these professional streams and these different disciplines and among different groups. And that was that's something that I've carried through with me. And I think Charlene's experience really highlights that, how diverse your journey can be as long as you learn how to work in and between these spaces.
Thanks, Danica. And Janice, do you have any other insights into kind of your educational background and how it's informed yours?
I think I'm the one person who doesn't have a background in gender studies, but I have a very social justice-y type background. And yeah, for folks who don't know, I actually did my undergrad at the U of A, and I ended up going into education and was a teacher out in rural Alberta. And of course, I was a social studies teacher, so high school social studies. And then yeah, and I did end up doing my master's and my PhD coursework, and in my graduate work, a lot of that I was focusing on secondary social studies curriculum and an examination of expansion of multiple perspectives, and what that would mean in future curriculum documents. I am, spoiler alert, I am a PhD dropout, only because there's nothing wrong with that. I freely admit it, only because I was doing my PhD and I was working full-time for the government in curriculum, and I was teaching at the university, and I was deciding to run for office, and for some reason I couldn't do it all. So long story short, as you all know, well, some of you know, I ended up following the political journey, and while I wasn't successful the first time running, I ultimately was elected. And so that's kind of been my frame for the last little while. So yeah, but I'm happy. Like I said, I'm just really happy to be in this conversation because, I've had a lot of interactions with folks in that program. And Eric, did we meet
We did.
in Lisa's class?
Yeah, we
Okay,
did,
I
yeah.
thought so. I didn't recognize you without the mask on, but I thought, no, I remember him. So no, thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. So, but Janice, I think you're touching on something really great, is that you don't have to have a formal gender social justice education to come to this work. We can all come to this work, and we can all be contributing in our own ways, even without a formal education. That's not necessarily a prerequisite. And so I guess the next question I really would like to pose to the panel is, one thing that we talk about in social justice studies a lot is translating our social justice education into practice, that praxis component. And I know from speaking to other students about this is a kind of an interesting conundrum for a lot of students. So I guess that's the question. How do the panelists that we have here today go about implementing their social justice areas of interest into their work and into their roles? How about we go with Charlene?
Okay. So this is actually, I've actually had experience in both getting a job and then choosing to be an entrepreneur in this sort of context. So right away, I graduated in 2012 from University of Toronto, and I was like, there's no jobs out here. So thankful if you're in Alberta, because there's a lot more jobs out here. And I got an NGO sort of an NGO sort of position, or nonprofit position, sorry. And so that was at the U of A. It was working with Edmonton On-Campus Society as an educational facilitator for people with developmental disabilities. So it was just a matter of, honestly, me looking at the skills that I saw was being listed and recognizing how much of my program itself, all of the hands-on experience that I got to do. Mind you too, when I was going to university, I also made sure that I volunteered with my professors for things that they had going on. So I was with one of my professors who was just so darling. She did Women in the Arts project. So I was a coordinator for one of those. So I got to learn a lot of hands-on skills in that environment. I would teach kids dance classes from lower income communities. I would do as many little things that would that would also join the things that I love, such as dance and the arts, and then like also get me skills as much as possible in the subject or in the topic of what I'm talking about or whatever it is that I'm studying. So like women's studies, you get to really understand society in like the deepest levels. So you can really handpick what feels aligned with you, which is always the best thing that I would always like to say is like, notice what sparks you. Notice what makes you come alive when you look at it, when you're like, oh my gosh, I have to. Like, I remember one of the things that I did as well was host a women's health seminar for one of my projects. And then go figure, I'm like teaching yoga and coaching on health and wellness later on. That was like 8 years later. So like, pay attention to those things that actually spark you. As much as you can, integrate, find out the professors that you actually like, what they're actually doing, the projects that they're involved in. Get involved with those things, because sure enough, you're going to pick up on skills. So then when you're actually looking at little job prerequisites, you're like, oh yeah, I've done that. Oh yeah, I've done that. I've done that too. Perfect. I can apply for this job. Whether or not it seems like it's something typical, I don't know what would be typical for women's studies. To be honest, I think you go into it knowing that you're not going to be a typical person. And I've never been quite typical. I mean, look at me, I'm 32 with blue hair. Like, I've never been typical. So I've always accepted that route in life. And I love how women's studies creates that space for me to have accepted that route in life. So yeah, I would definitely say to look at as many opportunities as you have to interact, to be part of community, and then look at those jobs that also imply for you to be part of community. And for sure, like, you're going to find something that feels good to you, that feels super aligned. And then honestly, I just decided like, oh, I really love teaching yoga. And I just kind of want to create my own community in that sort of sense, sharing my philosophies and empowering and decolonizing the concept of twerking, the concept of body movements, which I wanted to finally teach people like where that actually came from. Because it wasn't until I took my women's studies degree that I actually learned about my African history or ancestry. Go figure. I loved social studies growing up, but they never taught me about that stuff. So finally, I got to learn it going through my women's studies degree. And then I got to share that experience 7 years after getting my degree. Like, it's all of those things really do. Just notice what sparks you. Be as connected to community as possible, gain the skills, and then just keep following the little trails, the little breadcrumb trails that you get. And things are going to just reveal itself to you. You can always look at how the dots connect when you look back, but you can't really know it going forward. So you just gotta, yeah, that's my tip.
I love that, Charlene. And like something that we talk about at the Career Center is this concept of planned happenstance, is like making the most of unpredictable events and following those little threads. And so I think your story there really exemplifies that. Danica, would you like to speak a little bit about to kind of how you apply your own social justice kind of interests into your work? And I also would like to encourage the panelists to respond dynamically to each other. You don't have to wait for me to call on you. It would be great if we could get a rich dialogue going here. But yeah, Danica, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I got totally caught up in everything Queen C was saying. I think so much of that resonates with me. One thing that has been unique for me, I think, in women's and gender studies has been the professors' ways of reaching out and including you in their research and wanting to bring you along on the academic, but also social justice sort of path, and take advantage of that. Because I think for me too, that has been the most exciting and rewarding part of all of my education. And like Charlene said, those threads continue with me today in all of the different work that I do. So I think, yeah, I was actually just thinking about some of the coursework I did with Dr. Mar and how that is now coming up in my life in a way that it didn't before. You just never know how those things are going to happen. Right now I'm a PhD student, so I get to think about these things all the time. I get to really engage with social justice and take it up in a new way, but in the political science department, which is a different sort of flow. But in my previous role as a research coordinator for the Just Powers Project, I mean, I think I got that job primarily because I had a degree in gender and social justice, because the premise of that research project was based on climate justice and the intersection with social justice. So who's better for that position? Someone with a degree in gender and social justice. So you never know.
Absolutely. Tara, Janice, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in because it's so interesting to hear Queen C and Danika's experience and how they really took advantage of connections to their professors. I did not even realize that I could do that as an undergrad. So hearing your experiences, I'm like, wow, that was a really clever move. I basically thought that I was kind of on my own. And so in my, so for me, my kind of career trajectory started while I was still an undergrad, and I'm a former competitive baseball player. And so I quickly, an opening on the board of directors for our provincial sport organization opened up for the director of girls and women's baseball program. And so for me, that was such an aligned fit. And so I just in that little nugget there, take on volunteer opportunities to build your portfolio. So that was a massive role of responsibilities and experience that it literally was like, okay, things that I'm learning and talking about in the classroom, I get to directly talk about with decision makers on a board of directors table and with the president of like Baseball Alberta to implement these decisions and these changes to improve the experiences of girls playing baseball in Alberta. So it really like made my education come alive as soon as I got out into the working world, but was really a volunteer role. So highly, highly encourage folks to take on volunteer work. And, you know, I was just talking to someone the other day and saying that sometimes our volunteer work is so much, adds so much volume and yeah. Queen C, you've got the words here. Adds so much to our resume when, and in more a traditional sense, we're kind of encouraged to list our volunteer work as opposed to really draw out kind of what were your responsibilities and the skills that you acquired and the things that you accomplished in volunteer work. So I would highly encourage that. And then just kind of shifting gears to talk about my experience in working for the public service and kind of the initially I was really, when I first started out in government, I was really discouraged at my abilities to create change and implement kind of the things that I had envisioned I would be a part of as a kind of a lowly policy analyst. But then I stumbled upon a position and a friend, and you know, those unplanned happenstance moments. A friend had sent me this posting in Alberta Education in the First Nation, Métis and Inuit Education Division, and he really encouraged me to apply. And my experience there for 2 years of my career really, it reinstated my hope in folks like me working in the public service and continuing to, again, bring those perspectives of social justice and equity into our work so that we can advise decision makers in government like Janice to make decisions that are informed with a social justice lens and a social justice perspective. And so yeah, so again, just there might be a moment in my career trajectory, there have been moments where there's been a really kind of easy and kind of a really intertwined fit with what I'm learning and what I can apply directly to roles that I'm in. And in other times, there have been some challenges and some roadblocks, certainly working for a large bureaucratic settler colonial institution, not an easy place to implement social justice theory and praxis, but you know, recognizing that those little kind of moments where we get to infuse good information and good analysis that takes into account lived experience and diversity and equity theory into into policy decisions.
Awesome. Janice, anything to add?
No, yeah, I mean, I just love, I love hearing everybody's stories. And, you know, just Eric, you made the point earlier about, you know, you can come to your work in social justice from many different angles. And I just, you know, and it doesn't need to be necessarily from having the formal education, because, you know, every day I meet with people, I connect with people who are doing, you know, amazing work on the ground, grassroots, who may not have the formal education, but are, you know, doing so much to advance social justice in our communities. I was just at the Women's March here in Edmonton yesterday, and the wonderful Judith Gale, who's the head of Bear Clan Edmonton, who's basically, you know, she does not have the formal university education in social justice, but she is doing transformative work to support unhoused folks, unhoused folks here in Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory. So I mean, and I could point to countless examples like that, right? And then I just wanted to pick up on Queen Charlene's comments about just, you know, the path, you know, the varied path that we can take to get to where we are, because, you know, I truly had, I get people ask me all the time, oh, did you like plan to be a politician? And I can honestly say that was certainly not my career trajectory. And I tell the story of starting teaching. I was, you know, barely 21. I was in rural Alberta teaching high school. And I remember walking through the school, and on the walls were all the pictures of the teachers who taught there for like 30 years. And I remember saying to one of the teachers, like, you know, I'm going to have my picture on that wall. And sure enough, I was only there for about, you know, 4 or 5 years. And then I went to my next position. But you know, that 21-year-old Janice would have thought she'd be teaching and for the rest of her life and be, you know, incredibly happy doing so, or the rest of her career, I should say. But you know, my plans certainly didn't work out. And you know, I always tell people, especially when I give students talks on these sorts of topics, is just to, you know, it may not make sense at the time. You know, the path that you're on just can be incredibly confusing when you're in it. But you know, you look back and you think, okay, there were all these things that led me to where I am today. And yeah, and I just, yeah, I always like to underscore that. Don't feel like if you're on the Zoom right now and you're feeling lost and you're feeling, you know, not sure about your future and you're feeling pressure. I know it's easy for me to say it's going to be okay, but I assure you, it will all make sense one day.
Thanks, Janice. And it seems to be a common theme that there's so much unpredictability, so many things that we can't control in our careers. And, you know, I think each of the panelists up here have talked about how, you know, they've stumbled across roles that kind of led to from one thing to another to kind of get them to where they are today. And unpredictable things are going to continue to happen. But to your point, Janice, about how, you know, in the moment it feels difficult. What strategies have some of the panelists used themselves to navigate some of that uncertainty in the moment? How did you move beyond it? You know, in retrospect, you can kind of look, when you're looking back on that, what did you do in those moments when you weren't sure, when you didn't have any direction? And any of you, feel free to jump in.
Well, I could go. Honestly, I'd say in those moments, first off, take a moment to breathe. Most of the times, and this is why I think I loved yoga so much, is I found it when I was going to university, and I found myself having internships with professors, working, going to school full time, having a relationship, and parents are going through a divorce. And I literally actually like experienced a bit of a breakdown. I did, honestly, I did. Felt my body just like tearing up from the inside. And I was lucky enough to have gone to a walk-in clinic where the female doctor was just like, honey, you're stressed. And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean I'm stressed? Okay, yeah, but give me a pill. She's like, no, this is an address to like a non-denominational church. So connect with your spirituality, she said to me, and maybe try something like yoga. And I was like, yoga, okay. Well, I grew up in a really strict religion that said yoga was like totally pagan. So this was like super new for me. So I was like, okay, well, guess what? God's gonna be mad at me. It's gonna have to happen. And I remember that moment, honestly, when there was before YouTube was a big thing. So like rolled out my Pilates mat, and it was like when they had the PVR, you could like record 30-minute segments on TV. So I recorded the yoga, and I just remember that first moment where I was like, oh my gosh, is this what peace feels like? And I remember, like, I could cry anytime I say it because it was such a moment. And so from that day, I just practiced yoga every single day. I made sure I took the time to breathe and then to breathe. And then like so much is like taught that we just have to react. And there's no space in between that gives us an opportunity to actually respond to life. And if there's anything that I've learned on my beautiful journey, I've been to so many awesome places, encountered so many beautiful people. Old or wise people have told me, like, one thing that you have to understand, stop trying to like look for something. Stop trying to imply like you have to force your plan onto life and see it go XYZ, just like you said it would. Instead, just like notice what's there and move with that. Notice what's there. What is sparking you? Then go in that direction. And for me, it's recognizing that, like, and for me, I'm like, all the divine feminine energy, the masculine energy is different. The masculine energy says to go here, is linear, it's structure, it's that. When we're starting to look at women's studies, when we're starting to look at these sort of things, we're actually inviting the feminine energy. We're inviting the sacredness of that concept, where it's actually us gathering together in community. It's us supporting one another in community. It's us tapping into something that's so much more sacred and so much less spoken and so much more felt in your body. So if there's anything that I highly recommend, it's do things like meditate. It doesn't have to be a formal meditation. Listen to music, pump yourself up, breathe, just clear out that energy. Recognize like, hey, like my path is shown to me. My path is always shown to me. I can trust that every single time. You've made it this far. Trust me, honey, you're going to make it so much further. Like yoga was definitely my biggest thing, which is probably why I decided to then teach it and then to continue to pass on this sort of thing, because so many of us think like, oh my God, I have to have it all figured out right now. Like, no, you don't. And what makes you think that you would anyways? You never do. You just have to ask yourself, even I've learned this from Oprah as well, just asking yourself, like in those moments, calming yourself, breathing, touching your heart, what is the next best thing? And then doing that.
I love that. Like responding and not reacting, holding space for yourself to validate, where you are. So that's incredibly powerful. Thank you.
Yes.
Danica, do you have any thoughts on this?
How can you go after that? I feel like, gosh, Charlene, just yes, everything you said, yes. Before you said everything, I was like, yeah, you have to say yes to the opportunities that present around you. Like if something weird pops up and you do feel called to it, like do that and make sure you have a backup plan of some kind. I like to chase two things at once. And I've also learned when to say no. So you definitely need to know what your limits are and stay within those. So don't say yes to too many things, but be willing to say yes to those opportunities that creep up that speak to you.
Excellent. Do the other panelists have anything else to add to the conversation? Okay. All right. Moving on to kind of just reflecting on some of your past experiences. What is a job that you held that you disliked, either the elements of the job or the job itself, but still helped you make progress in your career? What was it about this job that you disliked? And what did you learn to help yourself move forward in your current line of work? Janice, do you have any thoughts?
Got to think about this one. These are good questions. Yeah, I honestly think I can look back, because so I went from teaching to I did a vice principal job role in another school in rural Alberta, and then I came to the big city, back to the big city of Edmonton, and worked on curriculum and a few various jobs with the provincial government. And I mean, I don't think, honestly, I look back and there were hard times in the jobs that I did, but there's nothing there's nothing that I regret. And, this isn't a conversation on identity or anything like that, but it's, many people know, I mean, I was a straight woman out in rural Alberta, dating men. And, I just think about how, like, for me, I had this career trajectory, this path that I was headed on. And I also had this sort of personal path. And I think, all the experiences that I had in my career also shaped, where I was going with my own identity and my own sense of self. And, coming here back to Edmonton and realizing there's a whole world out there, and also, grappling with my own identity and my own sexuality. And so, like, all that to say, it's a fairly I guess, I don't know, ambiguous answer, but I really think there's the career. A job is not just a job, right? A career is not just a career. It also provides a lot of life experiences. And so, again, if you're somebody who's already worked a whole bunch of jobs and feeling like, again, your path isn't clear ahead of you, all those experiences, all those roles that you've played in your life really do have a profound impact. And yeah, I'm rambling here. I'm not going to lie. We're back in the legislature, so I'm a little scattered today. But no, I'm like I said, I'm happy to be here, and I'm just loving all these amazing panelists.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Janice. Tara, Danica, Queen C, any thoughts?
Yeah,
Tara?
I can speak to this one a little bit. And I have had jobs that I have disliked, and I can really pinpoint kind of a couple aspects of them that and many times I enjoyed the position for a series of time, and then I maybe got to a point where I started feeling dissatisfied with a particular job. A couple things come to mind. One, toxic leadership has been a problem that I've encountered. Yeah, lots of nods. I even a former amazing boss of mine recently shared with me that she has encountered a negative leadership experience, and I'm honestly mind-blowing that this is still happening in 2022, that these folks have not been exited from organizations before. And I'm not talking about my own organization either. But toxic leadership has been a reason where I've left a job where I became so dissatisfied with a job that I loved the role, but I just couldn't work under that leadership anymore. So I made the decision to leave. Another reason why I've been dissatisfied in roles is where I felt like I wasn't being valued for what I could offer. So sometimes in roles, maybe I wasn't being given a lot of responsibility or leadership, like opportunities to stretch my skills and to grow. So I think these are really important questions to ask in interviews. I always now I ask, what is someone's leadership and management style? Of course, as you are presenting your best self in an interview, the hiring manager is often presenting their best self in an interview and can say whatever they choose. But also asking about, what is their organization's opportunities for growth, and what is their perspective on risk taking, and how do they involve lower level staff in projects. And so that's been, I've been told at certain times, like, no, this isn't a meeting that you get to go to, where it's been a project that I've had a major part in, and that didn't make sense to me. So, that's been a reason why I've been dissatisfied with a job before. And also where I felt kind of building off of that point where I felt like I haven't been able to make an impact. So realizing kind of whether it is an issue of the job or the role itself, or just like I've expended all that I can give in this particular role, maybe, and just kind of recognizing maybe it is time for me to move on to something else, and the organization to get new kind of fresh energy perspective in by hiring someone else into the position. So those are just kind of 3 reasons that come to mind right away when I think about in the past jobs that I've been dissatisfied with. And so, yeah, if folks have any further questions on that, like I've had some jobs that I haven't liked, so, you know, and it's not to say that these jobs were bad, like inherently bad or horrible. You know, it's a personal fit thing. And so I think it is a really individualized question and experience that each of you will have a different journey in.
I love what you're speaking about, Tara, which is like, even if we have jobs in the past that didn't work for us, that they help us gain a greater self-awareness of what works for us, what doesn't work for us.
Exactly. It has
yeah.
created such a better idea for me of kind of what I'm looking for, and to also inform new jobs. Like I said, I have new questions that I ask in interviews of an organization, of a hiring manager, as a result of these past experiences.
Absolutely. Danica, Queen C, any thoughts?
I once worked at a borscht shop. We only sold borscht. I only ever had 3 customers, and the borscht came out of a crock pot that the owners would deliver once a day. That was not my favorite job. It was very long, very boring. But I think further to especially what Janice has said, you know, if you also hate your job, or if your job isn't letting you be who you want to be, I mean, change your job. If you're like dreading getting up every day and going to that job, don't do it. And that's a pretty privileged thing to say as well. I've worked jobs that I did not like for a long time because they allowed me to do other things that I was pursuing. And I would say if you're stuck in those situations too, try to see how you can grow within that job. So can you become like a union rep if that's something you're interested in? Or can you maybe become friends with like the supervisor of a different department and maybe start to learn about what that's like? To sort of grow in those different ways, I think is really important, because yeah, there's no point in wasting your life doing something that you're totally miserable at. And there's so many opportunities, I think, for joy and for you to discover how great things can be. Also, further to what Tara said, I have definitely been in leadership positions where I learned how to be a better leader. And sometimes that comes at the risk of being a bad leader. And I'm really grateful, I think, for those learning opportunities that I've had and for the growth that I've experienced. But you can also be that bad leader. We definitely need to take responsibility for that.
Excellent. And we have a great question in the chat from Rain. I was wondering if the panelists have found it necessary or beneficial to water down their advocacy, to not come off as combative, to get others on board. Interesting. So for the panelists, in terms of like, I guess what this question is getting at is, do you feel like you have to couch or present your opinions or your kind of political approach in a different way to kind of stimulate conversation and generate relationships to actually build community? Yeah, anyone like to take the lead on that one? Go ahead, Charlie.
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful question. And I think it kind of sparks up to me because, you know, I found myself in situations where it was like a race situation, and then also like a female situation, and then both of them kind of clashing into each other, and I'm speaking on it very freely. And at times, I think I find it very important to always ask a question within yourself. I'm always asking this question, is like, what would love say? So I do my best to come from this place of as loving and compassionate as possible, but still maintaining truth, maintaining a sense of integrity and I listen to, so Marianne Williamson is definitely one of a huge influence on my life in terms of my poetry and all sorts of things. And I watched her speak one time, and she had said, you know, people often hate, and when they hate, they do so with like a lot of conviction and a lot of energy and a lot of passion when they hate. And we have to bring that same sort of conviction to what it is that we love. And so oftentimes I find that whenever it comes up in conversation, is to think less about what you're fighting against and think more so about what you're fighting for. And when you're fighting for something, and when you are standing for something, when you are speaking for something, the way in which you will articulate it will come off very differently. It will come off a lot more. I mean, still not everybody's first off gonna like it. That's just plain and simple. Get used to that. That's just life. If everybody likes what you say, then you're not actually doing something, you're not actually standing for anything. So just get used to that concept. But really and truly, like, what is it that I'm actually standing for? What am I speaking for? What is it? If I'm really here, for me, ultimately, everything comes down to like coming back to the humanity of life, coming back to us being all the same when you cut us open, no matter what. That although our experiences may be different, what is felt within ourselves as humans is still the same. We each feel anger, we each feel rejection, we feel acceptance, we feel all the same sort of things. So when I can connect to the universal language of feelings and concepts, then I'm just like saying like, okay, all right, I'm gonna say this from a place as loving as possible, but still with conviction. I'll still be clear on what I'm saying. So the clarity comes from knowing what you are actually standing for, knowing what you are actually speaking for, and bringing some sense of love and passion behind it. And for me, when people have noticed the love and passion behind that sort of concept, then even if they totally were like ready to come up against me, honestly, I've had racial conversations with people in rural Alberta about the concept of race, of this white man who's like talking to me about how like this or that, like, yeah, you guys have pretty much kind of brought it onto yourselves and da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, all right, put down the emotional, and not put it down, but just like transmute this for a second. And what is he saying for a moment? What is he coming from? Okay, well, let me just show you the humanity behind this. And then I just stopped fighting against him, and I just talked about what I'm standing here for. And the conversation was incredible. It was probably one of the most incredible conversations I had in my life. But yeah, and he was like, wow, I didn't actually expect to be, change my mind about things, but wow, thank you. So yeah, love with conviction. Ask yourself what you're actually standing for. That's my biggest advice for there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I think that really resonates powerfully, that we all have, these common humanity, the humanity of our emotions and the way that we feel inside of us, and kind of appealing to that as a part of a way to kind of stay true to your values and your message. I think that's really, really useful. Any other panelists have any thoughts on that? Nope. Okay, well, I think we're basically at 6 o'clock here, and I have some more questions from the audience. Mira, we'll get to you. I just got to kind of get through some of the questions that I already have sent to me. But Trisha had asked earlier, what kind of stresses and/or challenges do you encounter working in the jobs that most folks may be unaware of, and what do you have to say about work-life balance in terms of your area? Anyone have any thoughts on kind of any unanticipated challenges? Pardon?
I want to hear what Janice has to say.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, and I do have to go here soon as well, sadly, to another Zoom, but stresses, challenges, and I want to just touch on a couple of things that were just said, and I like Danny's point around, just if you don't like your job, try to change it, and some of the other comments just around speaking up and I guess probably even being vulnerable in your role. Those are all they're all very much connected to privilege, right? And so and I know Danny sort of mentioned that it's not easy, right? There are a lot of people where you can't just change your job, right? You can't just change your career trajectory. And I think I'd like to end by just talking a little bit about privilege and the fact that I'm in an incredibly privileged role. I was very privileged to have so many folks along my career path who supported me and who nudged me and guided me. And even, you know, there were people along my career path when I look back who probably didn't have the right, you know, the right advice for me. But those, I learned from those folks as well, right? And so, you know, there's all these people that you may not realize it in the moment that are there, that are guiding you and that are providing you support along the way. And you know, I think the hard to answer this question, you know, what are some of the stress or some of the hard parts of my job now being, you know, being an elected official. And you know, one of the hardest things for me is, don't worry, I won't get hyper partisan. You can fill in all the blanks. But, you know, when I'm in the legislature and I'm seeing a government that is making decisions every day that are hurting people that I represent, right? Decisions that are, you know, hurting some of my neighbors, right? The folks that need the most supports. And so I think I reflect on that and again, acknowledge the privilege that I have. You know, I'm a white cisgender woman who can mostly move quite freely throughout this world, right? And so, you know, I think using my platform, you know, I'll get shout outs for the work that I'm doing. And I always say, like, listen, I have it pretty good. And there are so many people who are doing that work on the ground. And I know, like I said, you know, I'm sure all of you can point to circles around you, folks who are doing the work on the ground when it comes to social justice, right? And who aren't doing it for any credit and aren't getting the shout out. So I need to use my platform to amplify their voices, right? And gosh, again, it's International Women's Day tomorrow. And I mean, we need to have these conversations beyond just one day of the year. And I know we are, and many of you are too, but you know, building for change. And I mean, change for me can happen in the legislature. I want that legislature to look more like Alberta, right? We are still very much represented by overwhelmingly white cisgender men, right? And so I don't know, looking around this room, thinking about some of the people here, considering a different career path, think about politics, just a thought. But no, you don't have to make change through politics. And in fact, many people would argue that you can bring change through, you can bring even more change through other roles, like the work that many of you are doing. And so I know I'm awfully rambly today, but I would ask anybody, you know, if you do have any questions about anything that I've said, like, please reach out to me. And I'd love to answer those. But Eric, I do have to go here shortly, I'm afraid.
Thanks so much, Janice.
No, thanks for having me. And just like I said, I really appreciated this opportunity. And I loved watching Danny's baby most of the time as well. I don't know about the rest of you, but I can't get over that incredibly cute baby. So thank you for having a baby on the Zoom as well. And my young son, Oregano, unfortunately is sleeping. And so he was not able to join the Zoom, but I know he sends his regards. So thanks, everybody. Take care. Happy International Women's Day, and much love to all of you.
Bye, Janice. All right, Mira, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers. I know before Janice left, I didn't get a chance to thank her as well, but I always love coming to meetings where I leave feeling amazing. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to feel great. So my question actually, though, is I really want to do a career in women and gender studies in some form, but as someone who's incredibly empathetic, I worry about feminist burnout, and I wanted to know how you all deal with that in your careers.
Anyone have any immediate thoughts?
I don't know if I can say that I felt exactly feminist burnout, but certainly there were, as I've kind of previously touched on too, there were moments where I felt really discouraged in roles where I feel like, you know, we're not making progress and we're not having an impact, and etc. And for me, I try to employ kind of the self-care things that work for me. Yeah, and also beyond that though, because if we're talking about social justice, we can't just say, oh, it's up to the individual to manage. I think that's where it kind of brings back to that conversation about managing work-life balance, and asking and demanding from organizations that we work for mental health resources and access to those things. We talk about sick days, and there's such shame in needing to take a sick day for mental health, and just we often feel like we need to rationalize it with like, oh, am I actually sick? But it's like, no, we need to demand that actually being written into an organization's policy that these things are allowed. So anyways, I'm rambling, but I think like find what self-care works for you as an individual, while at the same time, and I think this stands for a lot of the work that we kind of do, we can make our small scale change as an individual, while at the same time pushing for change at that larger scale level, and demanding more from our organizations and from leaders that the environment needs to change, and having those conversations about why are we feeling burnt out in the first place, and what needs to change about that. What can we actually change about the structure and the system here that will prevent this in the first place?
Thank you, Tara. We have another question, unless there's anything else that any of the panelists want to add. No, okay.
I love,
So go ahead.
yeah. I just also wanted to say like the self-care is a huge thing, a consistent self-care. And also it was just a little thing that popped up into my brain. I'm like, only amongst a whole bunch of women, professional women who have the right to be speaking will say I'm rambling too much. Like I've just heard it a few times. Honey, take up space, sis. Like take up space. If you need a sick day, if you need a mental health day, take up that space and take it for yourself. That's all I got to say about that. You are supposed to be here. We need your voice. We need you well rested. We need you in that space of, yes, filling up your cup so that from the overflow with you can give to everybody else. That's all I just have to say about that.
Thank you. Question from Jess. For someone who doesn't have a formal education in WGS or justice studies, maybe in education or English or business, what program, exam, or test or certificate is important to have for some direct formal training that verifies our skills and abilities? Any thoughts on that?
There's a couple different things that I'm aware of. There's probably lots that others are aware of, but so there's Gender-Based Analysis Plus that is free training through the Government of Canada. They call it Gender-Based Analysis Plus, but really it's kind of an application of intersectional analysis, or it's intended to be an application of intersectional analysis, and you'll get a certification of completing the online training. There's also the, if more like working on inclusion and like diversity, equity, and inclusion is your thing, there's the Canadian Certification of Inclusion Professionals. And there's a process that you can go if you have kind of previous experience and education. And so you could look into that certification. If you're interested in working in more like the DE&I type work with your education or your knowledge.
Thank you. I'm just going to keep rolling for some of these other questions. Angela has a question. Do you know how I can utilize a Native Studies degree in Women and Gender Studies? Yeah, excellent question. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
There's huge overlap, and like, yes, so many ways. I mean, a million ways. There's a cross appointment between the faculties, actually, or I think there's maybe a couple appointments that are now between the faculties, but yeah, there's a ton of overlap, and a lot of people leverage sort of both degrees or courses in both degrees to follow their different career paths.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I can speak a little bit to it. I'm I'm taking a class in the Faculty of Native Studies in a graduate course in colonialism and decolonization, and there's tons of overlap. So you can definitely, yes, utilize and fuse women and gender studies with Native studies. I can't see, the hands kind of popped up at the same time, but I'll go with Lizzie because we answered one of your questions, Jess, and then we'll maybe go to you next. But Lizzie, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. And like, yeah, echoing previous question askers, just thank you so much for all the panelists. This has been like so enlightening and so inspiring and just like so lovely. Kind of similar to the previous question that was just asked, I'm coming from the sciences. I'm doing my degree in computer science, but I've taken, a lot of English classes and WGS classes, and I really do want to leverage like tech for good. That is my eventual goal. I was wondering if any of you all had advice about how to start seeking like NGO and social justice type careers that would want somebody with a tech background or with a science background, and how to kind of bridge those worlds, because it's looking a little difficult as an undergrad currently.
I have so many thoughts on this as someone who is currently chasing algorithms as like a method of study using my gender studies background. I think the future is so open to you. I think, and as someone, I guess I used to work with a lot of scientists in my previous role as a research coordinator. We worked with a lot of scientists in the Future Energy Systems program here at the University of Alberta. So I'd be more curious to know about like where your passions are within the sciences and how those can apply, if that makes sense. So to start from like what you are interested in and then go from there.
I honestly feel like you're on the brink of about to be like such a critical role in so many organizations, to be honest. We're just starting to understand the importance of the tech. We're just starting to understand the importance of all of the science and like the way in which our future is going, the way in which the world is going. Like maybe right now you don't really necessarily see all the things that you want to see, but just like, again, like kind of like look for those skill sets, look for the clues. And I really feel like someone like you might even be shaping your role in an organization at some point. So that's just kind of my thoughts on that. But yeah, great job.
Thank you.
Jess, you want? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying thank you so much. Those answers are super duper helpful.
Jess, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, just I guess it follows up from the discussion about jobs that we don't like, but still getting value and skills and worth out of it. From those experiences of like changing jobs, like what transferable skills have like stayed with you and you use day to day in your work now?
Communication. Honestly, I think that's the biggest one is communication. Like learning project management, coordination of projects. Those are definitely skills that you pretty much learn in almost any sort of job, learning how to manage schedules and learning how to communicate between multiple people on a certain project in order to execute it and get it done. Like those things, getting something done, getting something put out to the world is probably one of the biggest functions of almost any organization that you're going to come across. So any sort of skill that aligns with getting something organized, getting something put together and then put out to the world is going to stay with you for the rest of your life. I promise you, like, and especially learning how to like work and communicate with people and kind of facilitate conversations. Facilitation is also a huge one that I've carried forward in different ways, in different settings, women's circles, all sorts of things and ways that I've applied it. But like learning how to ask certain questions, the sort of empowering questions that you need to hear, the sort of questions that get you the answer that you need in order to move forward. Yeah, so really getting into the communications concept is no matter what going to help you with networking. Just in a day-to-day, like talking to people, because then you're going to ask the right questions that's going to let you know if there's a relationship that actually needs to be nurtured there, or if it's just going to be like, okay, good friendship and move on, or like, good acquaintance and move on, because that's where a lot of your time can get wasted in the networking world, is if you're not asking the right questions, you're not actually getting to what makes sense, what really connects with you and somebody else, then, you know, you're going to try something, it's going to fail, da, 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 da. But yeah, so learning how to harness your communication skills and talking to people and getting shit done. Bless,
I
bless,
love
bless.
that. I love that. For me, it's been really kind of keeping track while I'm in a role of things that I've accomplished and things that I'm gaining is really helpful for, you know, updating your resume when you're looking for new positions. So like, how often are you're like, okay, it's time to update my resume, and you've just forgotten all the things that you've accomplished. So even just keeping, if it's not a formalized process with your organization, just keeping a journal of kind of all the different projects that you've accomplished, and then highlighting the skills, like to Queen C's point, this pulling out the actual skills that you've taken from that, and then you know, embedding that into your resume is what is going to help you. So like, and it can be like from communication, from facilitation, having difficult conversations with people on the communication side, strategic thinking, you know, being able to connect different ideas and different people together, like, you know, just really thinking through, like, what did I gain from doing that particular project? And then when you're, you know, when you're looking for that, you're job searching and you're updating your resume, you have this full list of things to add in and to look for and see your value that you can have. And that'll just help you so much in pitching what you've gained to a new role.
Thank you so much for those responses. We're going to have to probably wrap up here now. But for anyone who didn't get a chance to have their question answered, if the panelists are comfortable, you know, feel free to kind of maybe place your contact information in the chat, and people can reach out separately or individually, but feel no pressure to do that. You know, if there are any other questions, just to wrap up here, feel free to reach out to the careereducation@ualberta.ca email. And if you can, please take a moment to fill out our survey. And I believe Lauren will pop that into the chat. Thank you. But other than that, thank you so much to each of the panelists for being here today. I know I really enjoyed listening to your responses and having you here to share your knowledge with everyone here. And to everyone who attended, thank you so much for attending. It was great. And yeah, without further ado, I think I'll just give the panelists a little round of applause virtually. But yeah, thanks everyone.
That was so great. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Danny. That was so awesome discussion. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Great.
I should also mention that as a thank you for the panelists, we will be making a donation in your names to the campus food bank. So thank you again so much. We really appreciate your time that you spent with us tonight, and hopefully we'll see your faces again soon at some point. Thank you very much.